Hey everyone, welcome back to Street Side, the Street Medicine Institute Student Coalition podcast. I'm really excited to be welcoming our new co-host for the podcast, Michael Brennan, who is a family nurse practitioner in Rochester, New York. Michael, welcome.
Thank you so much, Vin. It's really great to be part of this initiative to get the word out about street medicine. And I'm a DNP, FNP in Rochester, New York, and I've been doing street medicine for 2 years.
Awesome. And we have a whole episode dedicated to Michael, which we'll be producing and releasing in the coming weeks. So let's get to our episode. Hey, Michael.
Hey, Vin. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. I had a really tremendous time at the 20th Street Medicine Institute Symposium in Kansas City. Really enjoyed getting an interview with Jim Withers and Jim O'Connell.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm bummed that I missed it, but I'm going to live vicariously through all of the amazing recordings that you have. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your conversation with the two Jims?
Well, basically, I just, it was hard to corral them. You know, they're busy men who know everyone at these symposiums, and it was a little bit difficult to get them isolated, just the two of them in a quiet room to talk to each other. But I basically just introduced it as the world would like to hear the two of you have a conversation about the future of street medicine. You are the elder statesmen. Just please talk to each other about the future of street medicine. And they did. And they not only talked about the future of street medicine, but they also expressed a lot of love and admiration for one another, which was very sweet.
Oh, that's awesome. I am so jealous that you got to put the two Jims in a seat in a room together to chat about street medicine. So yeah, let's just start off the episode.
Yeah, and here they are. Here are the two Jims.
It's good to see you, Jim.
It's wonderful to see you, Jim, too. And it's a dubious distinction to be known as an elder statesman.
Yeah, I guess I'll take it.
I will, too.
Yeah, so I always look forward to seeing you and catching up. We don't get enough time, actually, to do it. It's not like we have a forum for really, I think, visioning and navigating the movement, the work as we go forward. I won't say we're just making it up as we go, but we kind of are. However, we certainly have built on folks like Jim O'Connell's work to pioneer the model for people who are experiencing homelessness actually get care. That's borne such incredible fruit through the National Healthcare for the Homeless network and all the good that it has done. I didn't know about Jim when I started my street work, so I had to kind of circle back and see, someone else was going on the streets, before me. And that was a huge encouragement to know that I wasn't alone. And as I went forward with more and more requests to help new cities start programs, traveling around the world and getting to know people, that's what led to the vision of the first symposium, where Jim was there as well. And here we are in our 20th year. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I'd jump in and say the same thing. As I look back now, one of the things I cherish is that I've gotten to be friends with Jim and to watch him with all that he's been doing, not only locally, but around the world and spreading what the word of street medicine is. But I'm laughing, Jim, because I remember always longing to have a little bit more time. And then we were in Las Vegas. We were in Palm Springs not so long ago, and we had an old blue Volkswagen, and we drove from Palm Springs up to Santa Barbara, where we had to give another talk through an absolute torrent of rain, and I had to keep my eyes closed most of the time.
I was trying to keep the VW on the road.
But we had what I still cherish is a really, sort of really heartfelt and thoughtful and provocative discussion about who we are, where we're going, and what is, how do we take care of people on the street? How do we do that? And I think as I look now here at this 20th meeting and see more people than I would ever dreamed would be here, I realized that we had spent a long time working in obscurity, thinking, I remember Barbara McGinnis used to tell us, you get the best work done when it's in blessed obscurity. But it was pretty lonely. And then I'll never forget reading about you in People magazine. And I'm looking, whoa, there's this guy doing exactly this in Pittsburgh. He'd been doing it for a long time. So it was like the world opened up.
Right.
And now I look at you as like, I don't mean to take his name in vain, but you're like the Paul Farmer of the street medicine movement. I sort of know a lot about Boston, but you have been around the world. You've been to India, you've been to Africa, you've been to, you name it, and you've brought us all together. So I think the past is clearly, what you have done, and now I think the future, as we look at it as elder statesmen, is kind of an interesting, where do we go from here?
I feel a bit more like the Forrest Gump of street medicine, but it's been an incredible blessing. Meeting people around the world, seeing the common humanity, seeing people excluded, but seeing people respond to that exclusion. It's really given me chills to think about how those who are suffering have provided us a space of grace and a space to imagine how humanity could actually be towards each other. And it's so gritty and real. That's what my students all say. It's so real. And I think we've drifted away from being able to go into the reality of suffering, into those who've been tossed aside, and find ourselves in that environment. And students get it. That's why there's so many students involved, and they have given life to this movement. Do you remember when we first had our symposium, we kind of got together at the end, and we said, well, this is great. What are we going to do about it? And everyone said, well, we want to get together again, but we don't want no organizational stuff. This is just, we want to get together, but we don't want to be part of some organization. And but we do want to take care of our students. That's the one thing we want to do. We have gotten a little bit more organized. I think we're still chaotic enough to be legit, but it's been quite a journey. And I looked today and yesterday, and it is surreal to see the idealism, the inclusion, the hope.
I would say it was all of that, but it has been heartwarming these last couple of days, watching the diversity of people involved and the many avenues through which they approach this work, and the richness of that diversity. How they do things in Los Angeles doesn't work the same way as how you do it in a rural community in Alabama. And so hearing everybody learn from each other, talk about what they're doing, and then finding both our commonalities and our differences just makes us all feel better. And what seems to come across all the time, and I agree with you, by the way, I think if this were too well organized, nobody would come. So I think you have found the right balance of allowing everybody to be free and chaotic, at the same time keeping us all organized and on the same plane. But I think the future clearly is going to be in the students who come and get inspired by what's going on. And I used to wonder about, in those early days, how do we get more and more students to do it? Now we have a lot of people doing it, and even more, exponentially more students involved. So I have great feelings for the future. I worry, which is what I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, Jim, is, as we go into the future, as any movement like this gets bigger, how the center holds the periphery is really going to be important. So how do we want to center that, I think, will be the challenge, because we certainly have unbelievably inspirational people doing this all over the world now.
Yeah, if we're focusing on the students, which is great, because that's kind of where I was motivated, is to find a classroom, transformational learning, and even existential reflection about who we really are. The students have always been central, and they challenge and they teach, and I've always been concerned as well, though, that we can't make it just about a learning environment for us, but that the people must remain more important than any of our other objectives, no matter how noble they are. So it's always been a fine balance between the sort of early approach that you and I experienced, where we were out there with a few other people with lived experience, and trying to learn how to serve them. That, to me, has to remain our ethos and our guide. And then education and those things have to be brought in afterwards in a way that doesn't disturb the dignity and the centrality of the people on the street. So far, so good. We probably run off the margins here and there at times, but I do think we generally have auto-corrected, because I think it's what the students want too. They want they want to do the right thing. They want it the right way. They want reconciliation. They want solidarity. And they want people to take their power back, not have us take more power from them. But, it's kind of a miracle that we've come this far.
Right. I couldn't agree more, and I would add that one of the brilliant aspects of street medicine, as you've envisioned it, is that the most important person in this is the person we're serving, and the voice of that person is the one we listen to. And, when I look around to this conference and see how many peers are working now and teaching everybody how to approach people on the streets, it's quite extraordinary. We've talked a lot about this, but when our Healthcare for the Homeless program started, it was started by this group of homeless people, several of whom are on the board of directors, but they were fierce about not wanting charity, for example. They didn't want anything that was charitable. They wanted social justice, which is kind of what the theme of street medicine is. So it's not handing out or giving out. It's really finding justice. And that came mostly clear to me when I was out on the van one night. I think it was probably 1986. And, I'm thinking, God, this is great. This van goes out and brings soup and sandwiches and blankets to everyone by Pine Street Inn in Boston. Goes out every night of the week from 9 at night till 7 in the morning. And I got to ride along with these amazing workers, just like you did in Pittsburgh, who knew everybody out there. And many had been, homeless themselves at some point or in recovery. And I sort of piggybacked on the trust they had earned. But I'm under a bridge one night, and I'm we're looking for someone, got our flashlights out, trying to make sure somebody's okay. It's 2 a.m. This guy jumps up and he says to me, "Hey, buddy," and I'll never forget this. He goes, "How would you like your doctor showing up in your bedroom at 2 a.m. unannounced?" And I froze. Like, he was right. This is incredibly invasive to go into the homes and lives of other people as doctors and nurses without them asking for us. And we do this. That's part of what we do. So I remember, being saved that soon after that by Barbara McGinnis got together many of the homeless people who were part of our consumer board. And they got together and spent 3 or 4 hours talking about how they wanted to be served on the streets. And I remember they came out after that. We couldn't be part of it. We had to buy the pizza for them. But they decided they really did want us to come and make sure they're okay, because they're out in the middle of the night. But they wanted to know that they were people that they knew and we trusted. And then the final rejoinder was, take the damn flashlight that you have. And, we went under bridges with the flashlights looking for people. He said, flash that in your face, not in ours. Yeah. And I remember thinking, oh, my God, how nice that we're doing what people want rather than what we want.
So true. There's so many things we could talk about, and would love to have a chance to just really talk to you about it. One of the ones that comes to mind is our progress, if you will, but our incomplete progress in understanding the dynamic of people taking their power back, having a voice. I think the consumer advisory boards, in a way, you've honored the voice of people with lived experience, set the standard around the country, which most of us haven't matched, honestly. But in a street medicine world, we always feel like we additionally really need not just the voices of people who have been on the street, but the people that are in the street. And it's particularly challenged. You study the works of Paulo Freire and, Gutierrez and Paul Farmer's writings on liberation theology and the pedagogy of the oppressed. And the model is hard to apply to a community that's just so broken and fragmented and cast away from so many different places that they're just on the street. They do have community, and I do think we can find ways to better hear their voices in real time. But I don't know if you have any thoughts about kind of being more intimately centered in the real time experiences of people.
I think that's a profound and important point, Jim, because as we all know, at least I can give you our experience, as we've gotten people to be part of our consumer board and part of our board of directors while they're homeless, many of them after years get housed, and then they are formerly homeless and not currently homeless. And then the question is, how do you bring in people that will really represent the people that are out there currently experiencing, because that experience evolves. The other challenge we've had as much as I will say the best thing that's happened to us as a program is to have the homeless folks themselves involved in the designing and the planning and the implementing of programs, but also in the governance of the program. But we have learned that homelessness, as we all know, especially particularly street homelessness, is a wide, diverse group of people. And the voice of one person on the street doesn't necessarily reflect the voice of others on the street.
Right.
So how you manage that, I think, is going to be a perpetual and an evolving challenge for us. And keeping and renewing that voice, making sure it's honored, is a challenge. And we certainly haven't come that. We have some of our best board members were homeless for 25 years, but now they've been housed for 10. And how do we balance that?
It's sort of everything in my street medicine journey seems like it's the same basic truths are like the Fibonacci number. They're everywhere. The closer you go, the further away you go, the same lessons apply. So that the sacred respect for the other and your lack of judgment and regard, those principles apply when you're turning the lens around and you're looking at the police force, or you're looking at people in the system that you need to actually reconcile with and get a sense of broader community. You have to apply those same tools. And I've learned that, and I'm sure you've had the same experiences, that when you go to cities and communities, in some sense, you got to have the same tools. You've got to say, who are you? What's going to work for you? I'm not going to tell you what to do, and allow that dialectic to become a very organic thing in which people take their power and to create their own destiny, to write their own story.
Yeah, you bring up for me if I focus on the future for a moment,
Okay.
and the future is hard to focus on as I get older, so I have to be. I learned during COVID when I had to step back when I was ill and on immunocompromising drugs. I for the first time in my life didn't jump into the fire. I had to step back and watch these amazing young doctors and nurses and social workers and all sorts of helpers go in and care for people with COVID, and I had to come to the realization that I was entirely redundant in our own program, that it was perfectly fine without me, and that was horrifying when I first thought about it. Like, this is my life. They need me, and then it was also in some way comforting, although I hesitant to say comforting, in that they don't need me. That means we're okay. We can move on, and I think if anything, that's what we're seeing and witnessing here, this after 20 years, is that this movement would never have happened without you. It has been sustained and spiritually kept going by you. But now I'm starting to realize this is a bigger program than any of us, which is what you're looking for.
Dave and I were talking about that.
And it's going to sustain itself. And now I think of when I look back, so I know it's going to sustain. Now I think it's how do we, just what you said, how do we find the universal core of the center? What are the concepts that we will hold sacred no matter where you are in the world, whichever diverse population or whichever excluded population you're dealing with would hold. And I think that'll be our fun, but I think critical challenge over the next few years.
I think we need another VW ride for that one.
I'm game.
So we've been trying in some ways. My instinct is to apply some degree of elder statesmen or white wizards or whatever we are. And I've always wanted a retreat to just talk about the deeper implications, because we talk around the edges about that. And so many things come to mind, like, can we affect change beyond our own circle? And because we are, if I can say it, even despite our age, street medicine is sexy. And people notice it, probably even more than they should. We get more attention than other folks who are doing hard, important work. But there's something that was intentional from my point of view by going into the street, that it would be a visual and action that would be challenging to the folks that were back in the hospital. Not to be arrogant about it, but just to say, this is an alternate way, and not trying to fight inside of the system to with the power structure to change it, but to create a parallel example where there wasn't much competition, honestly, and doing things the way, we know instinctively as humans we would want to be treated. And then as it's grown, what is the dialogue that can now happen, since we are getting to be known as a movement between, and I'm sure you had the same sense when you started healthcare for the homeless. Like, how can we, in a mature fashion, not pure Che Guevara, but how can we really begin those dialogues with the foci of power in a way that is a win-win situation for them? So we're learning. We're beginning. The students are doing the blogs and the advocacy work and the education. The retreat that we had in India is a start to look at how can we become a human rights movement. But that time to do that and who to have involved, like you say, their circles, is a puzzle, and I don't know how to really solve it.
Yeah, I feel terrible that I could not make that retreat in India, but I listened during that.
We talked about
thanks all the time. But I couldn't agree with you more that that's the kind of conversation that has to happen. And the question is, who are the right people to have in the room at any given time? I also, as you were talking, Jim, one of the dilemmas for me was that we started doing street work as an outreach from a healthcare for the homeless program, which was at the time required to be part of the hospitals and part of the shelters. So we had the lens we came into this with was we had all these clinics going on. We had a respite program, but we realized in Boston, like some other Northeast cities, there's a very few number of people that stay outside, even though it's cold, and we were not serving them. We couldn't get to them. So then we started. It was actually a TB epidemic and the AIDS epidemic that got us to start going out to the streets back in whatever it was, 86 or early 86. But the challenge, I think, is, as you so aptly just said, one, it's visually very appealing. If I'm going to write something or take a picture of something healthcare-wise, somebody under a bridge being cared for by a doctor or nurse is
it's our logo if you look at it.
And then you realize that in the emergency room, day in and day out, people are doing amazing work. There's no good picture there, and same with the inpatient care. So how do we walk that fine line between making sure the system realizes how important it is to be out on the street and caring for people who have not been well served by our mainstream systems, yet at the same time not alienate that system and see them as part of who we are, or that we are basically ideally an extension of them. And I think that's going to be a struggle because there's so many different, what happens in Texas is so different from Massachusetts, so different from California, that trying us as a movement coming up with a good approach to that is clearly a challenge. But I worry about down the line, how will we, all of us, fit into solving the problem of good health care for all people?
Yeah, I'm not smart enough, obviously, to say there's a system that is going to make us all treat each other as we should. Socialism, communism, capitalism, whatever. So that is way, way above my pay grade or anyone's, I think. How to really structure society to really truly see each other as sisters and brothers and have that kind of solidarity. I do think, as I used to call it, in-reach. You go outreach into the street and you have the tools of respect, engagement, and then you flip it around and you say, geez, we have to walk back into the system. And what I found is that if you listen to the busy ER person and let them tell you about their frustrations, and there was that paramedic, you and I were in Santa Barbara, and after we spoke, she came up in her outfit and she said, I think I want to work with these people. And I said, well, great, because we don't get paramedics. And she said, well, I want to tell you, I hate the homeless. I can't stand them. They don't treat me with any respect. They yell at me. Sometimes they spit right in my face, and I hate them. And I said to myself, I like this girl. She's honest. That's the pain she's feeling. And I recognized the feeling of being stuck in a structure that was dehumanizing, that had structural violence, and not really wanting to be in it, but having really no choice because that's who you were by being in it. And so I said, well, you go ahead. Yeah, volunteer. So I came back and I did rounds with them, and she runs up in her volunteer shirt and gives me a hug. She says, I love these people. It was the same girl.
Yep.
And then she said, but you know what? Some of the other paramedics are really angry at me because I'm working with those people. So there's a sense of liberation there. And I do think that from our perspective, we don't just have a sacred duty to care for those who have not been cared, but I think we have a sacred responsibility to translate what we've learned in ways that are loving and inclusive to a hurting system of humans that are trapped inside of it. And maybe it has to be a one-by-one thing. But I think that if you do things one by one, there reaches a tipping point sometimes, especially with the students, where the society's maybe ready to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. That story is incredibly powerful, Jim, and I remember it well. As you say that, though, I also think about the issue of advocacy, because we clearly, have a vision of the world of how to care for excluded, that we want to advocate for both the excluded, for those who are excluded, but I think also within the mainstream to the people like that who are working in the mainstream, who can't stand homeless people because of the frustration of being unable to care for them, but then to somehow advocate that, no, there's stuff we can do if we work together, is really stuff we can do that fits what we want and need, and also makes your life so much better, as that paramedic was. And I think we may not, I should never say too often, but I think we see the tragedy of homelessness, and particularly street homelessness, every day in our world, and you want to rage against the system, appropriately rage against the system. But as big as we're growing, we are a tiny voice in changing the mainstream, and I think accepting that becomes the first step in how to do good advocacy, because we are not going to change the world, but we can, just as you described, change individually, not only the people we're serving and ourselves, but the people that we are depending on to care for people when they get very sick, or when they're dying, or when they get into housing. And that advocacy, I think, is something we can get together and teach students who are coming out. And I guess I would confess a bias here, and you should beat me up if you disagree with this, but we've had to learn how to not rage against the system as I was used to doing in the 60s, but how to say, somebody in the emergency room treating one of our folks poorly is probably because they are frustrated by having to do what society has not given them the tools to do. And we should be working with them to change that, and to say, no, I know we can't get them housed, but we can get them to a respite program or to a warming shelter. We can make sure they get followed up on the street. And those kind of connections, I think, begin to make it, begin to carve out for me what is a vision for how street medicine becomes invaluable in the mainstream.
It's kind of reconciliation, really.
Good word.
It keeps you humble, too. Anyway, I cannot tell you, and I don't usually get a chance to tell you how much you've meant to me in my life, your example, how you conduct yourself. I look to you to try to figure out, as Mike originally told me, how not to be an asshole. Because you puzzle me because of your gentleness. Maybe way down deep inside you've got a little bit of ego, but I've never seen it. And I'm susceptible to agendas and ego issues sometimes, and I just want to thank you for being a human that really has been true to something bigger than yourself. You always give credit to others. You always, it took me years to find out you were Paul Farmer's mentor. Of course you wouldn't say that. Oh. And so, not to get sappy, but I really love you, and I just want to thank you for being you.
Well, you way kind of say that, and I can't tell you how mutual those feelings are. Except you have to remember, I'm an Irish Catholic racked by guilt. So so the thought of ego never seems to sneak in there.
Gets squashed.
and I could give you stories about that, but the truth is, I think a lot about this because Barbara McGinnis, who we've talked about a lot, who was the nurse, it turns out she was a Third Order St. Franciscan or something. She was quietly spiritual but never talking about it, and threw F-bombs and everything else at you to cover up any hint of spirituality. But Barbara, I'll never forget when I first got there, she looked at me and she said, "Why'd you take this job?" And I said, "Well, the truth is, I took this job because they were looking for a doctor. They couldn't find one. I got told to do it." And she said, "Oh, that's good." She said, because have you ever tried working with saints and zealots? It's a nightmare. And so they beat us into wonderful, comfortable humility. We were always looking to do the next best thing. But leave that alone. So I would, since I have my chance here when I'm on the on the radio here or on the podcast.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. So I hope everybody who's listening to this understands that I'm sitting across from Jim Withers, who is really the real reason we are all here now. And while we were foundering, trying hard to figure out what to do in Boston, Jim recognized a need that was universal, not only throughout Pennsylvania, but the country and the world. And Jim, we owe it all to you for putting all this together and bringing us together and having thoughtful discussions like this. So thank you, my friend. And I will throw back at you. Love you for all that you've done and for all that you've meant to us.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, it has been delightful to listen in on your conversation. I'm glad you love each other and have loved the world. And thank you for participating in this edition of Streetside, the official podcast of the Student Coalition of the Street Medicine Institute. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in.
Wow, that was such an amazing conversation, Michael. I'm so glad that you were able to capture this moment. After having done this interview with the two Jims, what was your biggest takeaway?
Joy, unbridled joy at having spent that time with the two of them. And my sense is just the deep humanity that they both embody. Jim Withers and Jim O'Connell, just they stand tall in their love for others, and to be in their presence was definitely inspirational and encouraging to me in my walk as an NP doing street medicine. We stand on the shoulders of those who have gone before us, and they are giants.
Amazing, amazing. Well, thank you so much for tuning into Streetside this week. We're really excited for the episodes to come. Really excited to have Michael joining us, helping to co-host and offer his perspective as we continue to have these conversations around street medicine. Catch you next time.
The opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individuals included and are not representative of the opinions of the Street Medicine Institute or the Street Medicine Institute Student Coalition. Do not use this podcast as medical advice and instead see your own provider for medical care.